Hello there. Currently in Glastonbury Cemetery, walking around, checking out some of the trees. It's an interesting place to explore. In the background there is what remains of an old copper beech tree that's been carved into an arc. See that it's now quite deteriorated. The fungal growth around the base here is quite extensive. You can still see relics of the beechiness about it in its bark here. This is all fungal growth here. So I don't know how long they will allow it to stand in its current state. It's quite a weighty sculpture on the top. I think the badgers are coming out and digging in here. That's why it's in such a disturbed state. So this month's To the Trees newsletter is all about Glastonbury Cemetery. I'm exploring the trees in here. I've provided a map of all the most significant trees, and some of the denser hedgerow planting around the sides as well. Like many cemeteries, this one is full of evergreens, but it's also got the largest copper beech trees in the area. There's only one or two in Glastonbury itself that match these two. I love walking along this path. There are springs up in the top corner here. There seems to be another leakage of water that pours out of this grave and in this gully and then pours across the path here. Dion Fortune's grave is over there. I mention all of these things in the newsletter. And I love walking through the grand gateway that these two trees create and leading us on into the chapel of rest, or the two chapels of rest in this particular cemetery. So the cemetery was built in 1855 after the ones in town started to fill up too much, so they designated this land. Look at this magnificent tree. Epic. Big belly. They designated this area of land, this piece in front of me to start with, and then the younger part of the cemetery is behind. And it was in 1855, so logic might dictate that these trees were planted at that time, although we can't assume that, and there's no record of planting that I've been able to find. So it's a tricky one, but this is a beech tree of plus 3 meters girth. It's probably getting on for 4 meters, and they say a beech tree could be estimated at 150 to 170, which would put it at the 1850-60 mark. However, it's copper beech and it's growing on a slope, so it might have enhanced its girth for those reasons, and grown quicker because it's a cultivar. So if anyone has any information about the age of the copper beech trees in here, it'd be greatly appreciated. Other features within the cemetery here, it's actually the most densely populated collection of yew trees, the most dense collection of yew trees in the area. On last counting, there were 34 Irish yews. These are the conical ones that shoot straight up in a fastigiate habit, and then you've got the English yews in the hedgerows over here. And again, the English are showing a girth that might suggest they're 150 years old, something like that. They're starting to get the undulated, muscular trunks around the base, which is indicative of a yew tree of that age. So in the newsletter, I talk a lot about the yew trees, and specifically the Irish yews, because they've got quite an interesting story as far as cultivars go. They came in from Ireland in the 1800s, and there was a weird bushy yew that grew on a hillside in Ireland, and it was saved and then cultivated and then spread. Was basically ended up populating churchyards and cemeteries in the UK throughout the Victorian period, often replacing old untidy yew trees with these upright. That's not a yew, that's pretending to be an Irish yew. These upright. That's also a cypress, another tree you often find in cemeteries. The evergreen symbology in cemeteries is a key. It's that kind of life through the dark times. While everything else in winter dies, the evergreens stay green, so the cemeteries remain green throughout the winter time. So here's one of the English yews. That's a good 2 metre girth, although it's a multi-stemmed one. But you can see the muscular trunk, this kind of fluting that starts to appear on the tree. That's a natural part of the tree's growth process, to shed its skin as it grows, like a serpent. And Wordsworth said, serpentine, upcoiling and inveterately convolved. That's how he described yews in one of his poems. Really long poem about the yew trees of Borrowdale. And that's one of the lines, the only line that actually sticks in my head from that poem. There we are. The two chapels. So one built for Christian burials, and then one for people who aren't Christians, which used to be described as dissenters. So one's a dissenters chapel, so in the 1800s. Thankfully that word has not continued to be used. It sounds quite insulting, actually. One for the Christians, one for the non-Christians. And then we've got all sorts of individual trees dotted around as well. A rowan here, a few planted oak trees, young oak trees coming through beneath the largest holm oak in the cemetery. Holm oak being another one of those trees that are regularly found in cemeteries. And that's an evergreen oak. Leaves like this. Thick leaves, because they're from a hotter climate, so this helps them to retain moisture, and then they get these little acorns, not fully developed yet. Most people will misidentify this tree for bay or laurel or something like that, until you show them the acorns, and then they realise, it's all acorn trees are oak trees, so it's an oak tree of some kind. At this stage we meet the little house, the gate house of the cemetery. There's a beautiful weeping willow planted over here. And there's often bits of nature amongst the trees, creature around. I often find myself in the presence of deer, bats, owls, badgers, all of those. And here's one of our splendid Irish yews up close. Again, the stature suggesting a tree of 100, 120, 150 years old, quite a substantial base around here. Though very multi-stemmed is the fastigiate yew. And fastigiate means bushy, it means this. So on the English yew, the needles come out on a flat plane, whereas on the Irish yew, you can see they radiate from all the way around the stem, which gives it this bushy appearance. These little nubbins in here are the developing arils, so the red berries that we're familiar with on the yew trees start off little green nubbins like that, and they'll develop as autumn comes in, and you can see some of the berries there. So all Irish yews, if they're true Irish yews, will be female and grow berries. I just knock that one off. I'm gonna have a little nibble on that one. There's another one. And you can see the hole in the top, you can see the pip in the middle. The pip's toxic, so we spit that out. But the berries are yummy, they're gently sweet. And so all Irish yews, because they're created not from the seed, because if you plant the seed from there, then it reverts to the English yew behaviour. It's an unstable cultivar. So you take a clipping and you propagate the trees. Hello there. You propagate the trees from the clipping. And so then you're basically cloning the tree. And so all true Irish yews should be female and produce berries, as all of these do in here, all true Irish yews. More lovely fluted base around here. Look. You get the real bushiness in here of the Irish yew on the newer growth. Florets. And then we've got the odd other little cypress in here as well. That one's been taken over by ivy. Standard hollies that have been pruned to give them a canopy. And a couple of giant cherry trees too. So the next part of the walk will investigate around the back of the cemetery in the green burial area, where we'll find a huge oak. See you in a minute. So we're just now making our way up past the copper beech trees up to the green burial up here, and the copper beech trees are currently chucking off their nuts, and when they appear in this state, they open on their own to reveal the treasures inside. That's the beech nut. You can pop that out. And then in here, the most precious velvety innards, like ring box, rough on the outside, and then this really soft, like rabbit ear texture in the middle. And they open up like butterflies. I keep these in my pockets for fiddling with every now and again. One of my favourite things to do. And they're all over the floor, that's what you can hear cracking at the moment. So we're heading up in here. This dead tree here, in fact this row of trees here are elms. The one in the middle is still alive, but the others have already succumbed to Dutch elm disease. They're already dead. And I did that to try and find the little pattern where the beetle climbs in beneath the bark, lays its eggs. It creates this interesting glyphic pattern with a central line with lines radiating off of the side where the little eggs hatch and then eat their way out, and that's basically what kills the tree. So, I'm a bit out of breath. The cemetery's on a slope this steep, and while I'm talking and climbing, I'm getting a little bit out of breath. But here we are in the green burial area. So this is where people are buried without headstones in the nature. And across the top of the cemetery run a number of banks like this. And they're recorded in an archaeological study as part of a series of farming lynchets. Some of these banks are really, really high, and they look purposefully stacked. They remind me more of like the banks you see at places like Avebury and Old Sarum in my hometown of Salisbury. And then of course the banks around, the terraces around the Tor as well, also kind of have this similar slope and length about them. There are some nearby field boundaries here as well that have been listed as Iron Age or Roman origin. At the back on the east side, around, I think, past St Edmund's Well, which is in the corner over here. And so in the green burial area here, we're looking at the row of trees sat on another bank at the top of the cemetery. Behind the bank is a ditch. I'm not sure whether this bank and ditch existed before the cemetery or was put in when they created the cemetery enclosure. And then this magnificent tree, the king of Glastonbury Cemetery, stands at the back of the place, presiding over, and it's a good 4 metres probably here. Predates the cemetery, I would have said. And look at the size of the bank here, starting up here. This is a good 4 metre bank here. Incredible, and being preserved by the position of the oak tree as well. And then they've planted more little oaks in here, again preserving more of the bank. And so the cemetery continues on in this direction, although there are no burials in that section over there. It continues up the hill. And there are more banks as you go up, and then the final little treat of Glastonbury Cemetery is an awesome ash tree at the top of that bank. So all of these things I've put into the newsletter. You can read that on tothetrees.co.uk, and all of these trees that we've met already have been listed on there so that you can go and find them and learn about them yourself. I think we'll leave this walk here, enjoying the oak in the background. Maybe I'll offer a little poem to the oak tree. Oops. This is a Tennyson poem that I've been playing with recently. It's a short poem called The Oak, dedicated to the chief oak of Glastonbury Cemetery. Live thy life, young and old, like yon oak, bright in spring, living gold. Summer rich then, and then autumn changed, sober-hued, gold again. All his leaves fallen at length, look he stands, trunk and bough, naked strength. There. Right, thanks to the oak, to all the other trees that we've met today. Glastonbury Cemetery is an interesting place to explore. You enjoy doing that with the map and all of the things on the newsletter this month on tothetrees.co.uk. I look forward to seeing you soon. Autumn tree walk dates have been released. They're again on tothetrees.co.uk. There's about 9 of them throughout the autumn, and 3 or 4 abbey walks as well. So be well. I'm off to Wales next week, so there'll be some videos of the old trees in that place where I go in Wales to hide out every now and again. I look forward to broadcasting from there. See you soon. Bye bye.